Happy Tuesday, transmission listeners. We are here again today after our fun week last week with the 4th of July. We had a really great webinar with AIT as well. And so thank you again for dropping by and listening this week. Hey, Sebastian, how was your holiday weekend? Did you get some sun?
I didn't get so much sun, but I mentioned last week that I was going to New York. And we did do that. We went and saw Bruce Springsteen on Broadway, and that was quite a show. Good time to be there for a patriotic guy like him, really digging into lots of Americana stories and stuff. So it was a great weekend. How about you?
Yeah, so you had a really great weekend because you got to celebrate the most patriotic way possible in New York City with Bruce, which is nowhere close to what I did. I just was a lazy person on a beach, not using enough sunscreen, enjoying some family time. So, but it was nice to get some good weather because, we've been hit with a lot of rain recently. And, Detroit has really been dealing with that, especially around like Dearborn, Ann Arbor area as well. Speaking of Detroit, we actually have a guest today from our sponsor, AIT Worldwide Logistics. Before we meet Rich, let's dive into a message from our sponsor.
When you switch to AIT Worldwide Logistics for automotive shipping, you're partnering with a team of logistics professionals in Asia, Europe, and North America who develop customized supply chain solutions that are just as unique as your business. Whether it's trans-border, hotshot trucking, express ocean service, or an exclusive air charter, AIT has the expertise, technology, and carrier connections to achieve your production goals every time. Check out their link in the show notes.
So we just finished up a webinar a couple weeks ago with AIT, talking with Alan and Conway, who've both been guests on the show, which was really great insight from the two of them, especially when it came to more of AIT Worldwide Logistics, international relationships. But we're going to bring it straight back home here for all of us into Michigan. And today we actually have Rich Grant. He is the station manager at AIT Detroit's office. He's had over 35 years of supply chain knowledge behind him and has held roles at SEVA and SECO and Agility. And it's going to be really great to dive into some of the problems that he's helping customers solve in the Detroit area. Rich, how are you doing today? And are you keeping dry down there?
That's a great question. It's a little challenging. It is pouring rain as we're speaking again. However, it's Detroit. You guys are Michiganders. You understand that our weather changes frequently. So, it's just part of our day in and day out business here in Detroit. But yeah, I'm doing well. And thanks a lot for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited we have a lot of guests on the show from Michigan, which makes sense, right? I guess we've got a lot of really great auto manufacturers here. And, I'd really love to dive into some of the insight and things that you're seeing within automotive supply chain, being in Detroit, being in the heart of it all, and just different frustrations that you're hearing from your customers.
Yeah, Great question. And I think the frustration is at an all-time high. In my 35 years through multiple companies, as you mentioned, I don't think I've quite seen anything like this. Maybe the previous UPS strike, 20 years ago or something might have even been close. But port strikes, things like that come and go. They don't linger for 18 months. They don't linger for 18 months and then talk about lingering for another 18 months. And I think that's one of the frustrations that a lot of people here in Detroit and around the world that are connected to automotive are experiencing. And I'll give you an example. Last week, I was dropping off some dry cleaning for the first time in a long time. And my dry cleaner had said his business is down 75%. And I didn't put two and two together to realize that the connection to the auto industry is much greater than just being an OEM or a tier 1 or 2 or 3 supplier, or even a freight forwarder such as AIT. It's really the connections that take place in the hospitality industry, in the service industry, around the globe in so many areas. And it was just kind of fascinating to hear him say he may go out of business because Ford, GM, and Chrysler have not returned to work. Therefore, they're not getting clothes dry cleaned at the same rate as they used to. Interesting, kind of dilemma that is a real offshoot of the chip crisis or the pandemic crisis that's taken place today.
Yeah, we had a guest on a few weeks ago who brought that up, just like the community that's built around these manufacturers, and it's it's definitely, Detroit has had its ebbs and flows when it comes to that. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, sure. And then I would say, the other thing, freight forwarders across the board, this is AIT and many others like AIT that quite frankly have experienced incredible growth through gross revenue. So the cost of, transportation has gone up significantly. What used to be $3,000-$4,000 for an ocean container is now $15,000-$20,000 for the same lane pairs. The same is true with trucking and air freight, up 2, 3, 4 times from just a year and a half ago. And to give you a great example, CMA is a very large ocean freight forwarder. Based out of France. They reported $48 million in profit a year ago in the first quarter. This year in the first quarter, their profits were $2 billion. It's unprecedented to see somebody go up 40 times literally in profit in 1 year. So as you can imagine, they're making up for many years of not being profitable, of having to slow steam ships, having to park ships. And it's coming at a great cost, a cost across all modes of transportation, as well as all products and services that you and I enjoy.
Right. And I feel like it's the first time that they're able to actually hold these rates, it's the uncertainty of when these costs will come down and how long they're going to be really leveraging that lack of capacity. How have you found that customers are dealing with that uncertainty and trying to budget for that?
Yeah, fantastic. They're very frustrated. I think all clients, are no different than you and I personally, and some of our frustrations why we can't get something delivered to our home, or why we can't get something that we've purchased at a furniture store, to our home quicker than 2 months or 6 months out. They're experiencing budgets that are blown out, have been blown out for months, for the entire year. They're experiencing, a difficult time getting trucks or air freight moved or ocean containers. Capacity has, not been there. And then, the other piece we don't really think about is partially COVID, partially government funding of unemployment and, guarantees that don't have to be paid back. Staffing at all levels, at McDonald's, freight forwarders such as AIT, and certainly at the OEMs are, at all-time lows. You cannot go anywhere in this town or probably any other town in North America and not see a hiring sign out and signing bonuses and incredible wages being offered. So I think it's creating this perfect storm that, we are probably going to be dealing with 18 months from now. I don't see it going away or evaporating anytime soon.
Rich, I want to backtrack a little bit to the idea of just the cost for a container going up so much. I was invited down to Orlando this week to go talk to a very small, they're not really a car company, they're sort of a conversion company. They take old Land Rover Defenders and other Land Rover products and either put in new engines or, in this case, convert it to electric vehicles. And they gave me almost the exact same number that you just did, is they get about a container a week, 4 to 5 a month, and they were budgeting around $20,000, a month for the shipping cost, and now it's usually well over $100,000 a month just to get the parts even, because they're sourcing things from all over the world, right? They're finding these parts in Australia, in England, wherever they can track them down and having them shipped here. So it's funny that you said this is exactly what everyone's dealing with, but what do you know, and how can we understand where all these extra costs coming from? Is it just simply that there's so much demand that they're able to raise the rates? Is it that there's extra steps involved now that COVID's here? Like, what's causing this crazy increase in some detail? I mean, we know the broad strokes, obviously.
Yeah, it all started with COVID, right? It created, the ball rolling, if you will, or slowing down in this case. And then ultimately, I think it's been a combination of things. There's been shutdowns at ports. complete ships have had to been grounded because of crew being, tied up in COVID. You have seen just kind of this perfect storm, and I hate to use the term over and over, but it's kind of created that in almost every facet of logistics and transportation. And the ocean side is more so than most. You have not enough capacity, too much demand. It still moves 95% of the global international traffic moves on the water. You had some Suez Canal problems last year. It just keeps backing up. And what we've seen, and I've talked to a colleague who works for a competitor of ours who has a large presence in the LA port, that said that they have experienced problems in their facility, but they've seen it in the port to be really, really devastating, is when people start getting COVID, they shut down an entire shift, or they shut down an entire day or 2 or 3 of offloading ships, which means they now are parked out in the Pacific waiting to get a port to offload. So it's really been detrimental to the supply chain. And I think it has created a problem. Drayage companies that pull from ports to put it on the rail or to deliver it to people have also had capacity issues. They've had a lot of issues in getting cargo out of the ports because of staffing, both their own staffing and the staffing in the ports. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. And I think they're going to ride this wave of $2 billion per quarter kind of profits like CMA has enjoyed.
Yeah, the drayage stuff is really interesting too, because a lot of those drayage companies are competing with the last mile e-commerce jobs that are so available now too. And picking up a container at the port is not the most, it's kind of annoying, it's different. You have to get there early. And then God forbid it's not where it's supposed to be, and you're there dealing with those wait times. And, I always love looking at drayage moves because it's a very hard and very intricate, way of, or piece of shipping. And, just like everyone else, they're competing for the workers. So it's just, it's a problem that doesn't really have a perfect ending right now. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Speaking of freight forwarders, how have you felt that really, when you look at different modes of transportation, how have you felt that your customers have been kind of mitigating the pains from all of these capacity crunches by focusing on other modes of transportation? What are different routes that you've been really offering up as solutions in order to make these deadlines that customers are screaming for at this point?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think, all freight forwarders have been challenged as well, because the frustration that the customer feels is also the frustration that a freight forwarder feels in dealing with a steamship line, or dealing with an airline, or dealing with, the ports or a CFS or the customs broker, because things are moving at a different pace than we're used to. We're used to the automotive centric just in time, that everything moved like a clock and it works perfectly. And that has not been the case for, the last 15, 16 months. And I don't see that being the case in the foreseeable future. So I think communication has reached new levels, and how we communicate and delivering good and bad news, equally as quick and as fast as possible, so customers can react to that in the best possible way. We've come up with a lot of things that we've been doing for many years, but we've probably had to amp it up quite a bit in offering multiple solutions, multiple options for the same move. So what used to be a strict airline move or a strict ocean move or a strict trucking move, we've now come up with offering those as the customer requests, but also looking outside the box and offering blended solutions. You've heard about fast boats. It's a little more challenging to have a fast boat today than ever before, but you can put stuff into LCL, what used to be a container, and put half the load into an LCL and put half of it in the air and move it so the supply chain isn't disrupted, and still cut some of the cost. You can do the same in trucking, where maybe some of it goes into an LTL environment and some of it goes more in a dedicated truck or air freight. So we find ourselves offering 2 and 3 solutions for what was typically a single solution option. And a lot of our customers who are service minded and the cost is secondary to, not getting the product to their client or not getting the product into manufacturing on time, have really embraced those solutions. So we've been very fortunate in AIT Detroit, where I sit. We were fortunate enough to be Station of the Year last year in our network. And some of that became evident of just kind of stepping up and doing a little more than we were used to for our clients.
Definitely. So we've discussed this topic on past episodes, but being in the heart of it all, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the chip shortage as well, and really how that is impacting finishing these vehicles and the different technologies that it's supporting. Could you dive into that for us?
Like I've said, I think chips are amazing. It's a technology that none of us completely understand. They're very small. They'll fit in your pocket easily, and they power cars and locomotives and airplanes. And the technology that you and I and most of your viewers have come to really rely on is powered by chips, wafer chips that are made in Taiwan or China. And unfortunately, COVID has, again, slowed down that process. There's also been a fire that took out an entire factory. But generally speaking, COVID, staffing, and the supply chain have really slowed down things. I'll give you an example. AlixPartners, a big global partner both in automotive and other industries where they really support and consult, has said in May of this year that they suggested the chip shortage could cost the global automotive industry over $110 billion in 2021. That's a huge number by any standard. And if it truly does cost that for the OEMs, the tiers, and those of us that support the auto industry, I think it'll be a long time to recover from that. On the flip side, if you look, I have a friend who works for FCA, and FCA today manufactures a lot of high-end cars. Well, never in their history have they managed as many cars as they are today that are going to push the $100,000 sale. So Jeeps will be over $100,000 in some cases. Their trucks will have $100,000 options. Their sports cars with Hemi engines and Hellcats will have $100,000 options, along with Tesla, GM, Mercedes, Ford, and pretty much every manufacturer are now pushing more and more vehicles over that threshold. It's never been done before. And, the average car, because of wire harnesses and chips, are now selling for over $40,000 on average. The entry point for the 16-year-old is getting, a little bit out of reach for a brand new vehicle. So I do see that chips are not going away. They're going to be increased. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, yes, the chip has affected the car industry, but it's also affected the watch manufacturers, the cell phone manufacturers, the televisions, and all of our technology that we've come to get used to. Whether, it's the Wi-Fi that's hooked into your washer and dryer or the one that, does the GPS for your Tesla.
Yeah, I saw that number of the 40,000 average retail price, in the headline last week or whenever it came out. And it's starting to get a little bit frightening for those of us who've been watching, car prices. And, I remember when it was in the mid to low 30s, not that long ago. I want to say just a couple of years. So that's a pretty dramatic increase. But this kind of, reality that we're dealing with is forcing that kind of change on the industry. One of the things is, that we wanted to talk about a little bit was the idea of the model years. I mean, some of these cars, they're built to 2021, but they sit in the parking lot because they need the component that has the chip in it, and now they're not going to be ready for however many months whenever they can get the parts. But what have you been seeing? What can you tell us about the model year changeover that usually kind of happens, seamlessly? Like the old models go on sale, the new models come out, and it's just kind of part of the annual system that everyone's used to. But this year, as with so many things are just being thrown for a loop.
Sebastian, you bring up a great point. So one of the things I think we're seeing, and just to kind of bleed off the chips a little bit more, you kind of mentioned that the chips are having a great effect. We've talked a little bit about that. They're still manufacturing vehicles by the thousands every day in many plants across the world. And what you're seeing is they're parking these vehicles. They're parking these vehicles without technology chips. So as they get chips, they're being hand carried, air freighted, expedited out to these facilities, which are racetracks or parking lots or just green fields where they're now installing these chips 24/7, putting them on trucks, getting them to dealerships where you have consumers sitting there literally within 24 hours waiting to grab those vehicles off the lot. So there's never been an inventory shortage like there is today. The second piece of, that is what happens in 2022. This is the time of year where you see a lot of advertising about new model years. And then that starts trickling in September, October, November, into the fourth quarter. This year, I don't see them coming out with a 2022 when they quite frankly haven't been able to sell the 125,000 F-150s that are sitting around town in parking lots. They're not going to sell at 22 before the 21s that are sitting. So, there's a couple of people that I've talked to that are in the industry that said there's one of two things that are going to happen. They're going to blend the 21-22 season or model years, and they're going to push them together with very little change, or they're going to brand it with a 22, but it's going to be a 21 model. And I think it would be reasonable to think it'll just get blended from a person that isn't in the know, like somebody who works in body and white or engineering at General Motors or Ford or Chrysler or BMW. But it seems to make sense that they'll just blend the 2 years together and probably start working on a 23 or a 22 and a half.
So really, moral of the story is for all of our 16-year-old listeners is get 2 summer jobs in order to afford the car that you'll end up buying in 2024.
Grace, if you have a 16-year-old or one, I would recommend that they go to college to be a wafer chip manufacturer, and they start their own company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, selling chips to the auto industry.
I love it. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's get that going. Michigan's economy needs it. That's for sure. Well, Rich, thank you so much for being on today. It was a pleasure getting to meet you and hearing about your knowledge in the industry. And, hopefully soon we can do an episode where we're all together in the same room since we're in the same state. But, for all of our listeners, make sure that however you're listening to this, podcast, even on YouTube, that you're subscribing so that we can notify you when we have new episodes, and also let you know when we have webinars coming up as well. Make sure that you follow our newsletters on freightwaves.com and get those in your emails. Other than that, this has been Sebastian and Grace, and thank you for listening.